Greetings. What up? Welcome back. It's Red Zone Inthelab. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the offense. We're going to go deep dive into the offense, into the offensive scheme, into the defensive scheme, and to Kliff Kingsbury. We have Mark Bullock, NFL Analyst, that's going to join us today to break down those things. So on the other side of this, we're going to have Mark Bullock. We're going to chop it up for a little bit.
Shout out Red Zone Inthelab podcast.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's Benjamin St. Jude, DB for the Washington Commanders. I want to give a big shout out to Red Zone Inthelab podcast.
Welcome back to Red Zone Inthelab podcast. I am Deuce, and joining me today, Mark Bullock. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. If y'all not subscribed to Mark's Substack, you're doing it absolutely wrong. How you doing today, Mark? How you been, buddy?
I'm good. Yeah, it's been nice to have a season of football where it's just football and it's positive football, as opposed to what it has been the last 20 years. So it's a lot more optimistic, a lot more positive, and a lot more fun.
Let's get right into it, but let's go back a little bit, right? I think we talked in the in all season after they hired Kliff Kingsbury, and kind of looking at what he's done in the past, what he's currently doing. So kind of taking those two together with Kliff and kind of looking towards the future, because it seemed like he gives us something different every game that we haven't seen yet. So can you kind of just break down Kliff Kingsbury himself, what he was, what he is, and what you think he's going to be?
Yeah, so obviously the idea people had of Kliff coming out of college was this air raid guy, and obviously he brought a lot of that to the NFL in his first stint with the Cardinals. And you saw a lot of those air raid kind of principles of hurry up, no huddle, 4 wide receiver sets, spread everyone out, attack down the field, 4 verts all the time, and stuff like that. I think he kind of was tagged with that a little too long. I don't think it was necessarily fair to label him with that by the end of his term in Arizona. Certainly when I was studying his 2022 film with the Cardinals, it was a lot more of a conventional NFL offense. Now, sure, there were still some remaining principles and stuff that we have seen here, but it was a lot more based around the run game, and a lot more. They started to branch out into play action stuff, but they hadn't done it as much as we have seen here. And it was just a lot more conventional. It wasn't the typical air raid stuff that you would see. Now, again, there would be air raid concepts in there, but there are air raid concepts in every NFL offense around the league. The good ones tend to make their way into the NFL. So, he still kept those, but it was much more conventional by the end of his term in Arizona. And obviously he had that little bit of a break, and he went to USC where he was kind of a helper out and not really a coordinator, and kind of just an analyst there. And that seems to have done him the world of good. And then he's come in here and he seems to have grown. He seems to have learned some lessons. He seems to have learned that, he needs to build out from the run game aspect of his offense into the play action stuff, and mix up the personnel groups, which he's done a really good job of here, and use a lot more varied formations. It's not been as varied formationally as a Kyle Shanahan or a Ben Johnson or those kind of guys, but it doesn't need to be as varied formationally if you're gaining the advantage of having varied formations by being no huddle and doing some of the other stuff that they are doing. So they're getting the really good results right now, and so we've seen evolution from him, and I think a large part of that is obviously just him growing as a coordinator and a coach, and then the influence of the staff that they've built around him with Anthony Lynn and Brian Johnson and Bobby Johnson and all those guys coming in. And obviously Dan Quinn was around guys like Kyle Shanahan and the LaFleurs and Mike McDaniel and all those guys, because he had them all in Atlanta. Sorry. So he's seen firsthand how that offense can be so explosive, and Kliff saw that in Arizona too, playing in the same division as Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. So he's seen how those offensive systems can work and be so explosive. So he does seem to have learned some lessons from that, and be implementing some of that in his own way, not just copycatting them, but he's implementing it in his own way, and it's obviously so far been very good.
We heard a lot about his lack of pre-snap motion, especially after the first game. I mean, we heard a lot in the summertime, and especially after the first game. It seemed like he'd done it a ton the second game, but it just seemed like he was just moving Terry across the formation, wasn't really doing anything to put him in better positions. But the offense is one of the best offenses in the league. So how do you feel about pre-snap motion, or just the way Kliff is doing by hurry up offense? He may move a receiver from left to right to kind of see if they're a man, or he may do a motion every now and then. But how do you see, or how do you look at pre-snap motion compared to, maybe a couple shifts?
Yeah, so pre-snap motion obviously can be very useful in the NFL, and obviously there's reasons why you see all the best offenses using a ton of pre-snap motion. And it does give obviously the quarterback an indicator of, it's not necessarily definitely man or zone anymore. Teams are getting really good at disguising those man zone indicators. The typical one, for people that don't know, if you move a receiver from the left side of the formation to the right, if a cornerback follows him across the formation, that would typically indicate that it's man coverage. If the corner stays where he is and the kind of safeties rotate or whatever, that would indicate that it's some sort of zone coverage. But teams are getting really good at disguising that now and not giving the indicators and trying to break those indicators. So, but you can still change the equation. So the things that Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and those guys do with pre-snap motion is they'll line up in a 2x2 set, and then they'll motion one guy across, and it'll suddenly be three guys on one side of the field and one guy on the other, and that will change what the defense is doing, because a defense will have a coverage call. It might be a quarters coverage, but a quarters coverage against a 2x2 set is very different than a quarters coverage by a 3x1 set. So that will cause some communication. It will make guys have to, we've seen in Washington on defense, and I'm sure we'll get onto it, is how they've struggled to communicate those different coverage checks once a guy goes in motion, and so you can get some explosive plays off of that, and you can create some odd looks for the defense and stuff like that. Kingsbury has been doing some of that in Washington this year. He doesn't do it as much as everyone else does, but he gets a lot of the same effects from the different things he does. Like his answer would be going no huddle and up tempo by as soon as the previous play finishes, he's getting his guys lined up, ready to snap the ball instantly. The defense has to be ready to snap the ball as well. So they have to get lined up, which means they typically, rather than go into a huddle, see what the personnel group is and see what the formation is coming out of the huddle and make checks at the line, they have to go to one of their base coverage goals, one of their base fronts, and be like, okay, this is what we've got to be solid against most things, but they'll know it's pretty basic. And you get kind of a same effect where you're generating better matchups, you're getting basic looks from the defense, you're uncovering any kind of disguised blitzes, because those guys have to be ready to blitz as soon as they're lined up, ready to snap the ball. Now they don't have to snap the ball straight away, and we've seen that quite a lot, where they're ready to snap the ball with like 30 seconds left on the play clock, and then Jaden Daniels will just kind of slow things down and evaluate what's going on and let the play clock bleed down. Maybe he'll audible out of a bad look, or maybe he'll see that there's a light box and he can change from the pass play into a run play that gives them a favorable look, or vice versa. So, and then that's all giving the offense the advantage and similar advantages that the pre-snap motion stuff is doing for those other offenses. But It's just a different way of getting there. So that would be Kliff's most likely response, is that I can get a lot of those same advantages that the pre-snap motion stuff does. I just get it differently. I just get there differently with the no huddle and that kind of stuff. So yeah, and obviously the risk of going down that path is if you go 3 and out and you're no huddling, you're off the field in 30 seconds and your defense has had no time to rest. But what we've seen so far from them is they've been incredibly efficient and they've not been going 3 and out. So it's clearly working for them right now. I expect they will have some bumps in the road, but yeah, I obviously it's going well right now.
Jaden Daniels and how he's processing the NFL game. I thought after week 1, when he obviously missed a few, I mean, it's getting better, but he's still leaving a little out there. I kind of thought about he's trying to get used to the NFL window, because even though he was kind of accurate at LSU, like Neighbors and the kid in Jacksonville, they would have 5 yards of separation, but in an NFL, you're rarely ever going to get that. In a yard is a window in the NFL. So I just thought that he was just trying to adjust. I thought it would take a while, but obviously it hasn't taken that long. But how do you look at the way Jaden Daniels processes?
Yeah, I think you can see that he is understanding what he's seeing and he's knowing where he needs to be going with the ball for the vast majority of the time. I think he is sometimes a step too slow. Sometimes he's a step too fast. Sometimes he's trying to get through reads quicker than he needs to. And that's just adjusting to the speed of the NFL, knowing like, okay, I need to be quicker with getting through things than I was in college because the NFL is faster, but I don't need to hurry through things. I still need to pace myself and make sure that my reads are matching up with my footwork, and getting from 1 to 2 to 3 efficiently, but not missing an open receiver because you were too quick to get off of it. So he's had instances of both of those where he's just been a little bit too quick, a little bit hurried, or he's been a little bit too slow. And you expect that from a rookie quarterback as they adjust to the speed of the NFL. But generally speaking, he's done a pretty good job playing within the rhythm and the system of the offense, and processing all the information being thrown at him. They're doing a really nice job of helping him with that. Because the examples that I use is, I think a lot of people underestimate what a quarterback can do in the run game in terms of at the line of scrimmage. When you have, if we take Sean McVay and Matt Stafford, for example, Stafford's been in the league for 10 plus years. He's seen every look. He knows what the different fronts are good against in terms of the runs that they want to run. So if you want to run outside zone and a defense puts up a bear front, suddenly that's a bad look to run outside zone into. And Matthew Stafford can walk up to the line of scrimmage and go, we're not running a good play into this. We'll check out of it. That's a lot to put on the plate of a rookie that hasn't seen every look, doesn't know the strengths and weaknesses of every run in their own playbook. So Kliff's getting there by making things really easy on him and making it all box count related. So they'll run a bunch of RPOs, and I know people are getting frustrated with the bubble screens and the tunnel screens to the receivers, but they all have a purpose, and it's you spread out the defense, and Jaden Daniels can basically just read numbers, and it's, okay, I've got 4 defenders over 3 receivers out there. I'll hand the ball off because I've got a lighter box to run into. Or I've only got 3 defenders over 3 receivers out there. I've got more defenders in the box. I'll throw that screen. We'll pick up 3 or 4 yards. They'll get sick of consistently giving that up. And that's what we saw in that Giants game. Was in the first half, the Giants were giving up those 3 or 4 yard bubble screens, and Washington kept converting on 3rd and short, and they got sick of it. And in the second half, they suddenly put an extra defender out there, went light in the box, and we saw Brian Robinson, I think it was a 40-yard run down the sideline, straight away when they did that. So that's the kind of stuff that they're helping Jaden Daniels out with in the run game, which makes the foundation of the offense obviously very effective with him as a runner as well, but making it simple for him so that he has been able to focus more on learning the pass game concepts and where he needs to go with his progressions, and against different coverages, what might be better available against a cover 2 look compared to a cover 3 look compared to man coverage. So I think that's been a really big help for him. I think that's been one of the underrated parts of what Kliff is doing for him, is how he's helped make things simple in the run game with box counts and how that plays into everything else, allowing Jaden Daniels to be further ahead as a passer than he probably would be if he was having to learn all the run game stuff that a guy like Stafford knows at this point in his career. So, I think it's been really good to see his development in that regard.
So you're telling us that there's still like the ceiling is extremely still high.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So that is the thing. Like, I tweeted this after the Cardinals game on Monday that I thought Jaden Daniels was obviously very good and the stats were very good, but he left 4 or 5 good opportunities out there that he didn't take. And that 4 or 5 might be generous. That he could have. There were probably quite a few big plays that he could have hit. Now, obviously, that sounds like a big criticism, but it's like, oh, you're being very picky. He played a great game. He did play a great game, but we want him to be elite, and he wants to be elite, and the team want him to be elite. Those are the kind of plays that an elite quarterback will make, and that will be the difference between. I think people misinterpreted that as it being overly critical, and I meant it to be optimistic in that he's in his 4th game. They just put up 40 points, and he's missed 4 or 5 chances to hit shots down the field. They could have had way more. Right. So I think the ceiling is sky high, and it's really, really exciting.
So I always kind of thought Anthony Lynn, Brian Johnson would have a input within this offense being built, especially Anthony Lynn when it's coming to the run game. So what type of impact do you think those two guys has had and will continue to have on the offense?
Yeah, well, for one, it's hard to say exactly because you don't know how much input they're having. And I think people kind of forget that the run game they had in Arizona under Kingsbury in those last few years was actually very good.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of that has carried over. Now, there are certain concepts that Bobby Johnson used a lot with the Bills and with the Giants under Brian Daboll. Some of the center pull stuff with Tyler Biotish, that is all. I don't want to say that's all coming from Bobby Johnson, but that is stuff that Bobby Johnson did a lot with the Bills, where what was the name of their center? Was it Mitch Morse or something like that?
Morse.
Yeah, he was a guy that's really athletic and was able to pull to the edge, and they did a lot of center pull stuff with him, and you're seeing that a lot this year with Tyler Biotish. So I think that's probably coming from him, and that builds in nicely to the gap scheme stuff that Kliff was running in Arizona. So those kind of mesh quite nicely together. Anthony Lynn comes from the background of the Shanahan system. He was I think he was running back with Mike Shanahan back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he obviously majored in that zone scheme, and was obviously with Kyle in Arizona. In San Francisco. So he majored in the zone scheme. He does still obviously have a history with gap scheme stuff as well, and they've been mixing in zone and gap stuff. But I do wonder how much of the kind of the zone read stuff that they've been doing is kind of impacted with Anthony Lynn and how he was with Kyle Shanahan. And obviously, we saw what Kyle Shanahan did with RG3 and tried to do with Trey Lance and that kind of stuff. So that could have an influence. I would suggest that probably Anthony Lynn's biggest influence has been sequential stuff. So getting to the different run reads, running the play action stuff out of the same looks as the run reads. That was stuff that Kliff didn't do very well in Arizona. He ran a lot of good run plays, and he ran a lot of good play action. Well, he ran a few good play action concepts, but they never really meshed well. They didn't look the same. He would just you'd see him run a bunch of power run schemes in the game, and then they would fake a zone run scheme to run play action. And it was kind of like, oh, well, you haven't run zone the entire game, so we're not buying that that's a play action. That's a run. We're obviously that's a play action. So I think Anthony Lynn's experience with the Shanahans kind of brings the ability to mesh those things better together and understand that if we call a formation and a motion out of a personnel group to run this play, that sets us up a little bit later in the game to show the same formation, the same look, same personnel group fake the exact same run that we just ran, and then we can run a play action off of that. And then you can mix in the concepts that Kingsbury was using, because they were good play action concepts. They just weren't meshed well with the run schemes. And that's where we're seeing the play action stuff start to look a lot better. And I think there's still growth in that. I think there's still a lot to come out of that play action game, but we're seeing them transition a little bit more from, they were really RPO heavy in the first few weeks. The last couple of weeks, they've been still fairly RPO heavy, but they've been mixing in more play actions, and it's been slowly progressing from RPOs to play actions, and that's where I think you'll see more of the explosive plays to come out of the offense.
Like you mentioned about, leaving some plays out there. What do you think could be next for Kliff? Like what haven't you seen from the offense that we may see on Sunday?
Well, I think that the continued progression of working from, as I said, the more RPO heavy stuff into some more of the play action stuff, and hitting those shots off of the play action. There's been a couple that Jaden's missed. There's been a couple that just have been well covered. And he obviously hit one or two as well. But I think when you start to see them transition more into that, and he starts to get more comfortable with the kind of rhythm of, sometimes being under center or being in pistol, and turning your back to the defense to fake the run, and then getting your eyes turned back around downfield, and seeing that the second level of the defense is all stepped up, knowing where your throwing windows are, knowing who's going to be trying to fall back into those windows, and where you can layer the ball over the top of those guys, and where you need to wait into the second window, and that kind of thing. I think that's where you'll see the progression from him. I think that's where the offense has potential to really grow, because you see the best offenses in the NFL all run play action, and all get a lot of their explosives off of play action. And we haven't quite seen that yet here. They haven't had too many explosive plays. The explosive plays have come more with the run game, and obviously one or two shots to Terry, which were amazing. But hopefully we'll start to see a little bit more of that, and it will probably come more via play action than anything else.
All right, on to the defense. Tell me, Mark, what is it? Is it hustle? Is it talent? Is it chemistry? Is it scheme? What is it?
I don't think it's hustle. I'd be very hesitant to say it was any sort of hustle or effort. I think the players are going out there trying their best, and I think if they weren't, they wouldn't be on this team. It seems to be kind of an essential thing of a Dan Quinn team. I think the biggest issue for them right now is they don't trust their corners to hold up in man coverage, but they have the identity that they want to be. They have this philosophy that of what the defense they want to have is, where they're going to play a bunch of man coverage. They're going to blitz a bunch of guys to force the ball to come out quickly, and they want those corners playing man coverage to be aggressive, attacking those underneath routes and jumping the balls like we saw Trayvon Diggs do and Deron Bland do quite a lot last year in Dallas. That is their template. That's what they want to do. They don't have the corners that they can trust to hold up in man coverage right now. So the thing they're having to do is waver from that philosophy a little bit, which is instead of blitzing everyone, we need to drop a few more guys back into coverage, and maybe we keep two safeties back rather than just a single deep safety. And by keeping two safeties back, suddenly you're light in the box against the run game, and then the offense finds it a lot easier to run into a lighter box, as we've seen with Washington this year with those RPOs. When you run into a lighter box, you're significantly more advantaged, and it's really hard to earn a gap back on defense when you're light in the box. And the way they've been trying to do that is by stunting the defensive line and stuff, and that can be effective. It can also be quite risky if you have. Jonathan Allen's been guilty of it a few times, and it's not necessarily his fault because they're asking him to stunt and try to be disruptive to earn a gap back and kind of steal the gap. But if he stunts one way and suddenly the lineman kind of adjusts and just lets him go that way, suddenly he leaves a big hole in the defense, and that makes it really easy for the running back just to cut back into that and hit a big gain. So because their issue on the outside at corner, they don't trust those guys to hold up in man coverage throughout the game. They're having to play 2 safeties deep, which helps a little bit in the coverage, but sometimes still gives them issues. They still aren't playing man coverage great. They're improving, but not great. And then that gives them issues in the run game, and they're not able to blitz as much, so they're not getting as much pressure as they'd like. So a lot of the issue, I think, stems from the lack of reliability, I'll say, at corner. I still think there is talent there. I just think it's not reliable talent at this point in time. So that's where I think the root of the issues come from.
I kind of look at the defense now, Marcus. Look, listen, if you give me three or four stops a game, if my offense can score, that's all I'm kind of asking for. But again, that's just not sustainable. I think they played their best game this past week. Have you seen anything that'll give you hope that this defense can continue to get better and at least be like a top 15 to 18 defense?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, let's say 15 to 20. Let's not get too greedy.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll crack top 15 without some sort of move at corner or some sort of drastic improvement, like Forbes suddenly everything clicking for him, or St. Deuce suddenly, becoming this lockdown corner because he has this amazing length and press ability or something like that. Short of that happening, which seems unlikely at this point, I think there are issues at corner. As long as they want to try to stay with their philosophy on defense, will hinder them going forward until they sort out their issue at corner, which probably won't be addressed till next offseason. This week we saw them change things up a little bit. As I said, they played more two deep safeties. They played more zone coverages, and they were mixing up what they were doing. You saw the communication better between defensive backs, and so they were able to. And they went from trying to blitz like 5 or 6 defenders to force the ball out to going into more simulated pressures where the offense feels like there's 5 or 6 rushers, but it's actually just 4, and you just don't know where the 4 rushers are coming from, and the rest still drop back into a Tampa 2 coverage or cover 3 or whatever zone coverage you want to run. But you kind of disguise where the rushers are coming from, and you can attack protection schemes. And if you know in a 2nd and 8 from midfield on the left hash, they always slide the offensive line to the right. You can suddenly bring extra rushers off the left side, and you can overload them on that side, even though you're only rushing 4. Their line sliding the wrong way, you can overload them and get pressure that way. So that's what they were transitioning a little more into this week. So that might be a route forward for them. But I still think they have this underlying philosophy of wanting to be more of a man coverage team, wanting to be aggressive with their blitzing. And as long as they want to stick to that, until they get their corners sorted, it will be quite bumpy, I think.
All right, last 2-parter. What's your biggest surprise for this team as a whole up to this point, and how do you see this season playing out the rest of the way?
Well, I can't say I expected the offense to be this explosive this early. I did not think they would put up 30 odd against the Bengals and then 40 odd against the Cardinals like that. That is the biggest surprise for me. I did think the defense would be a little bit better than it is, but I guess I did kind of guess that the issues at corner might cause them problems across the unit. So the biggest surprise would be the offense being so efficient and so consistent in how well they were able to move the ball. And it feels like everything works almost. And that's I don't think that's ever happened in my time covering Washington. I don't think I've ever seen an offense where it just feels like everything's working really well. Like even when Kyle Shanahan was here and it was that 2012 offense with RG3, there were still some things that didn't quite work, and it was like, oh, Kyle's getting too cute there and all this kind of stuff. The times where we think Kliff's getting too cute is like, oh, they try to double pass with Luke McCaffrey, and then you watch back the film and you're like, actually, that was wide open. Would have been a touchdown.
Oh my god! I told people when that happened, that's why he's a quarterback. Like
Yeah.
I mean, that's why he's a wide receiver now.
Wide
That's
receiver.
why he's a wide receiver.
Yeah. So that would be the biggest surprise. Is that
What about the Wildcat
offense?
stuff, Mark?
Yeah, that I think there was a little bit of that from Kliff in Arizona. With Kyler kind of spreading out wide and James Conner taking the direct snaps. And he seems to like this kind of moving the offensive line and getting the unbalanced offensive line, playing a tight end at left tackle, moving the left tackle to right side, and that kind of stuff, which is all good fun. And it's all nice run game stuff, but it is all kind of smoke and mirrors, which is good. It's not a bad thing. It's dressing things up, but it was all kind of smoke and mirrors to hide the fact that we're just going to run another counter run or another power scheme, and it's just going to be a slightly different look that you kind of have to worry about. I do think at some point we'll see that same, because they've shown it a few times now. I think we'll see they must do some sort of handoff to Jaden Daniels on a end around or something, and maybe a pass off of that. So I think there'll be stuff off of it, but yeah, I think it's more smoke and mirrors at this point.
How do you see the rest of the season playing out, Mark?
Yeah, look, I went into the season with quite low expectations of what their record would be, and they've obviously blown that out of the water so far, going 3-1. And this Browns game looks like, I know people are starting to call it a trap game, and it's like I don't think they've been good enough to consistently say you can call it a trap game at this point. But like I still want to keep my expectations realistic, because the defenses they have played that they've beaten haven't been particularly good. You might have expected maybe the Cardinals they have a good scheme, and the Bengals have a good defensive coordinator, but they were missing some personnel and stuff. So I still expect there will be some bumps in the road at some point for the offense. And I think the moment they stop scoring 30 points a game, suddenly that defense starts to look even worse. And it'll be really tough for them to keep winning. But given the way the rest of the NFC East has gone so far, I don't think it's out of the question that they could compete for the playoffs. I don't necessarily think they will storm the division and go, 13-3 or 13-4, whatever it is now, and win the division outright. But I think they can certainly compete within the division. I think my expectations in that regard have been raised, where I think they can compete within the division. But I still think there's still quite a long ways to go, especially if they have an injury at a key position. If a Terry McLaurin or a Sam Cosmi or Tyler Biotish, obviously Jaden Daniels, if one of those key guys goes down, they don't have the depth on the roster to step that up and replace that. So yeah, I still, I guess, cautiously optimistic about the team, but I think I still try to keep expectations well within range of where they could be from the start of the season.
Thank you so much again, Mark, for joining. But please let everyone know how to subscribe to your Substack.
Yeah, so it's just my Substack's just markbullock.substack.com, or you can get the Substack app and you can go find it on there, and you can just subscribe. It's $5 a month, and that gets you access to, I usually do 3 or 4 articles a week, breaking down. Typically, it's one on Jaden Daniels on a Monday after a game, and then something on the offense or defense on the Tuesday and Wednesday, and then maybe like a rookie or breakdown or something like that on the Thursday. So 4 breakdowns a week. They're usually quite long in terms of article. They're 2,000 words or so, and 10 or so clips of plays and stuff that I'm breaking down, and it can be, let's say, scheme or individual players and then that kind of stuff. So yeah, can subscribe there and hopefully enjoy the breakdowns.
Yeah, for sure, because I definitely do. And that is at Mark Bullock NFL on Twitter. Please follow if you're not already. Again, we appreciate you for joining us, Mark. We appreciate all of you for watching, for listening. Remember, do it because your time is very valuable for you spending with us. We definitely appreciate it. Remember, do it because you love it, not because it loves you. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love.